Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am your co-host Harry, and joining me today, as always, is Rafe. How are you?
Hey Harry, I'm great. It's like I said, it's a good day to be doing a podcast. It's a great day to be doing a podcast with you. And one of the reasons for that is we have the world's greatest listeners. They have made us a global top 10% podcast. As always, you can reach us at buffnagle@buffnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, tell your friends about it, give us 5-star reviews, say nice things about us. You know what? Go to the break room at your office and write on the little whiteboard in there, or maybe just on the front of the fridge, say, listen to the buff. That's exactly right. All right. And make sure you subscribe, hit the smiley stars, hit the likes. Remember, tell a friend to listen and you will get a free episode because you know what? The buff is something everyone needs to hear.
That's right. The Bufnagle is to your ears as a Thanid is to your body. Right?
Have you been reading to little kids lately?
No, but that recently just popped up in my head. It's something you need. It's a Thanid.
A Thanid is something that everyone needs. Yeah, so it's a hat, it's a bicycle seat. Okay, so but the Bufnagle podcast, Bufnagle the podcast is one of those things for you. It is the Thanid of
For your ears.
Of audiology. Yes, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Harry, last time we talked, and it wasn't
That's a lie.
to Bob. Last time we talked, we discussed the Bufnagle executive team's European trip.
Yeah, and you did that on a salary of $0.
Essentially nothing. Yeah. Well, you know what? It's part of, I don't take a salary for this. That all goes, everything gets invested back into Bufnagle.
We are a nonprofit. 501c. Look us up.
You'd be surprised if you find us there. So, but we are offshore, so it's going to be difficult for you to find us. We're hidden in Jamaica. Last time we were talking, we talked about this trip we made, and I recounted our trip to Florence and all the exciting things we saw there, and namely the Duomo, the big dome there, and all the things surrounding it, and how that became the first church of the Renaissance. But after that, Harry, on the Saturday, after our couple days there in Florence, we hopped on a train and we went to Assisi, which is where St. Francis of Assisi was born.
Of?
Yes, he is of there. Now, if you pull out your little map of Italy, you'll see that that Assisi is southeast of Florence, and it's a little bit east of straight north of Rome, which makes it, I think that's called northeast. Is that right? It's on the north side of north.
I didn't join the Navy. I'm sorry.
We need Brock on here to determine what this is. I think it's northeast of Rome. So you go straight north of Rome and then go a little bit to the right, and you will find Assisi. And we took the train because that's how a lot of people travel in Europe. Certainly, if you don't have a car, which we didn't have, renting a car would have cost us money. We would have had to drive in places we didn't know where we were going, following rules that we may or may not be used to following. And then we would have to do all those things with the car. So we just took the train.
Ticket. Yeah.
Yes. And I didn't need a Bufnagle ticket. It was like, they pull you over. Wait a minute. You're one of the buff guys. Like he would have said,
Here's just a free pass. Can you
follow
sign my
me?
CD?
Follow me. So it's, trains are very popular in Europe, and you've been there, Harry. You were to Eastern Europe, which I think they're probably, I don't know,
fewer trains.
Fewer trains, yeah. And you didn't have a real opportunity. You were going to odd locations, not near
I was going
trains.
to odd locations, so I actually had a car.
You did have a car. All right. So, did you drive yourself there, or somebody you had to drive?
Yes, I drove across the Pacific, really fast.
Really? Well, you had a driver in Albania, right?
I didn't have a driver. I drove myself.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Were you driving stick, or was it what kind of car was it?
Oh, it was an old Volkswagen type of car. I mean, that there was I don't know what else we had.
Just cars
Skoda.
yeah, okay.
Skoda, I think was the brand.
You didn't have a Yugo.
No, it did not.
Okay. So, well, people like trains because they are less hectic, of course, than air travel, and they're more relaxing than car travel. Like when you're driving on the train, you can, you can get up and kind of walk around, and you can take a nap, you can eat, you can read, you can take phone calls, and a lot of things that I would like to do while I'm driving, but I can't unless your mom's driving. Then that's the only time I get to do those things. But we did that on the train. But I found the ticketing thing a little bit complex. We were able to buy tickets online, but then we were warned that it's very important that you validate the ticket the day of the train travel. You have to go like onto the app. It's kind of like checking in for the airplane.
Interesting. Okay.
So, yeah. So I went and I got the Trenitalia app for my phone, which is kind of, there's two ways you can either run it in English or in Italian, but there's some pieces that they didn't bother translating. So when you
might as well just run it in Italian.
Yeah. So I learned, we learned some Italian words here and there, but I remember to validate the ticket. I did the check-in thing for our little train numbers. And then when we got there, I guess he's called the steward, comes through the car once you get rolling, and he checks to make sure everybody has a valid ticket. And if not, he, I don't know, tosses you out the window or fines you a couple lira, or they use euros in Italy, I think. They used to use lira. Did you remember? Do you know that? Do you remember that?
I've heard the term.
Yeah.
I've heard the coinage. Yeah.
And there are different kinds of train. Like the train will have a bunch of cars, and some cars have a number 1 on them, and it's not just the first car. And some of them have a 2, and it's not just the second car. They're first class and second class. And the first class is like you pay to be not surrounded by people that don't want to pay as much, like students.
Anyone living in a hostel.
Yeah. Hostel, yes. Bad 70s horror movie kinds of places. So there are special fares for all sorts of special situations. Like elderly people get special fares, and kids get special fares, and students and low-income people. And if you're doing a round trip, or if you have a city pass or a country, like it's a very complicated system. But we decided we were going to just go in the first class car, and it was very quiet. There were like 3 other people in the car, and everybody sat quietly. And it's, the train says it's leaving at this time. You get on the train and it pulls away from the station. And we had about 10 stops during our 2-hour ride from Florence down to Assisi, and it was very quick, and it was very orderly. And one nice thing about train travel is they kind of treat you like a grown-up. Like there's no big sign that says, "Warning, do not climb underneath the train."
Well, yeah, unless you're like in the Bronx or something.
Well, yeah, but you're kind of trusted to realize this is a really big thing. It's going to be traveling. It will crush you. Don't go there. Don't try to touch the wire on top and on the bottom. And everybody kind of knows that. And I found it very refreshing to not be treated like a child, like you typically are when you do air travel, right? It's like, don't go over here, stand over here. You're on the moving sidewalk in the airport, and it'll say, "This moving sidewalk is coming to an end. Please be prepared to step off." And you're like, I got it. I can see there's no more sidewalk. And I guess people fall sometimes because they're not paying attention.
So what you're really telling me is the lawyers haven't invaded Italy yet.
Bingo. Zach and I were talking about that tonight. He was like, yeah, it's all about litigation. And since they haven't litigated there yet, they haven't started putting signs on their coffee that say, "Warning, this is hot." So warning, train is very big and can crush you. That is not part of the train travel experience. So anyway, we got to Assisi about 11 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little bit before noon. And the train station there is not actually in Assisi. It's called the Assisi Stop, but it's about 2 miles from Assisi. And it was one of those things where, looking at the map, I thought, well, we could walk this.
You could walk that.
I could walk that, and your mom could walk that too. But the first part of the little walk is like, I don't know, 1.33 miles, pretty much on flat plain. But the last half mile, 2/3 of a mile is up a very steep hill up to the town of Assisi. And when I wasn't exactly sure where we were going, and I figured it's just safer to take the little bus that said bus to Assisi. But of course, it said that in Italian, but I knew how to read it at the time. So it's but it's this little train station, and we got there and we grabbed our bags and we stepped off, and then the train went on to wherever else it was going, and it was a kind of a neat little. It was a great feeling because it was this old town train station with very few accommodations. There was a little cafe in there. There was a ticket window. I think there were some lockers where you could store stuff if you're like Jason Bourne and you need to put all your extra passports and a
bag of money
and weaponry in the little in the lockers. But the guy there who was making coffee also sold me a ticket for the little bus that came through, and he told me when the bus was going to come through. And I think what was very interesting to me, it was a very comfortable experience in the little, I'm going to call it a cafe, but there's probably a word for what it was like a cafe in a train station that kind of occupies the idea of you can get a quick meal here where they pull a frozen dinner out of the freezer and drop it in the microwave.
It's like ticketing plus cafe.
Yeah, it's probably an Italian word that means ticketing plus cafe, right? And so, but it was a very comfortable experience. It was quiet. There were no TVs blaring CNN or what I guess that's what they have in the airports, right? Or
just
news
on
repeat, or stock tickers.
When I did my train travel up in New York, you reminded me with this more or less relaxing experience at the ticketing window. The train station in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is the end of whatever line.
The end of the world.
It's the end of the line that goes from Poughkeepsie down past the other side of West Point. Right. So that's one of those things you have to somehow get across the bridge.
Right.
And then back down into Grand Central. So the train station at Poughkeepsie felt the same way. It was two sets of benches on the left and the right. Once you come in, the ticketing counters in front of you. You can go about the rest of the town. It was almost out of place with the rest of the city. But I have a feeling that this ticketing area in Assisi fit right in with the rest of the city.
Yeah, it really did. And we didn't get a chance that day to really march around the city at all. Well, and we weren't even in Assisi yet. We were in a piece of something called Perigula or something. There's a city just to the west, 2 miles to the west of Assisi, and that's where the train stops. And it was kind of a lower suburb area. There's some houses around there and some little businesses and things. And it was interesting on the train. We went through we just went through through Tuscany and on the train. And so you would see farmland and you'd see vineyards absolutely everywhere, Harry, and sometimes not very big.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys would have, I was going to say 20 feet of vines, but I'll change it. About 6 meters of vines.
One fathom of vines.
Yeah. Well, right behind their house, there was a guy that had grapes here, and this guy had grapes over there, and there was a glob of grapes over there. And then there were some really, really big vineyards. And there were things that made it kind of feel like, it didn't feel like the open spaces in the US when you travel through, like when you get on the interstate and you drive across Ohio or Indiana or Nebraska, and it's just wide open. Mm-hmm. This was more like East Coast kind of open space where you have little farms and little towns. Like when we biked, Harry, from Albany or from Buffalo to Albany, we went along the train line through some of those old industrial towns, and you'd go by there'd be a little farm over here, and there'd be an old car up on blocks and a barn that was kind of half fallen down and some chickens running around. We saw a lot of that. And I don't want to say it didn't seem like run down to me, but it seemed, I guess for lack of a better term, natural and human. Like
established.
Kind of established and fading a little bit. It wasn't like they weren't impoverished like destitute kind of thing. And I want to use the word Appalachia, but there are parts of Appalachia that are very impoverished and really hurting. And there are parts of Appalachia that are doing all right. And it kind of felt like the outskirts of Charleston, West Virginia, when you drive through on the interstate there, that there are just pieces here. And it didn't look any different really, other than more vineyards and fewer soybean fields than it does here in the States. That was my take from the train of parts of Tuscany, and I guess I'll call it Umbria was kind of the area we ended up getting to. So anyway, we get wow, I got a lot more notes here, Harry, and we're at 20 minutes in. So Assisi is on this hill that is it's just east of the train station, about 2 miles east, and the hill goes up and looks over the Umbrian Valley, I guess I'll call it, and all of the rivers there. I was like, so I decided to look up the rivers. Where are these rivers going? Are they going straight to the ocean, or where are they going? It turns out that I think all the rivers in the valley there eventually combine to provide tribute to the Tiber, which runs down into Rome. So
all roads and rivers lead to Rome.
Everything leads to Rome eventually. So we were there. Assisi is on the southwestern slope of this large hill overlooking this Umbria Valley. And so if you wanted to, you could get in the river at Assisi and just paddle down.
So you and Mom went to the local guy. You got one of those swan boats, right? The swan pedal boats. And off you went down the tributary.
We went down the tributary
to go see the Pope in a swan boat.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we were going to do. And that was an interesting thought to me. It's like, how often did they? No, it wasn't like a direct route. It wasn't like wasn't like the Tiber goes through there. And I don't know exactly where the Tiber starts, if it starts with the confluence of a couple other rivers. But I tracked the river a little bit, and it went down to Rome. So I started thinking then about St. Francis, who was born there in they think about 1181. So before 1200, okay, that's a long time ago, to 1226. He was not very old when he died. It was 26 plus 19 is what, about 40 something? He was in his 40s.
My math isn't good, as previously established on this podcast.
Yes, we've done that on a number of occasions. So I think he was in his 40s. Now, he had a vision where Christ told him, Francis, go and repair my church, which, as you can see, is falling into ruin. And he was in this little church in the valley there near Assisi when he saw this. And he looked around, and the church was falling into ruin, but he wasn't sure if he meant, should I rebuild the church physical, or should I rebuild it spiritually? Is that a call to rebuild the faithful, or is that to rebuild the material? And so he kind of did both. He kind of worked to rebuild these churches, but he also built the Franciscans, who are a religious order. He had a falling out with his merchant father. His father was like, no, you should be a merchant like me and sell silks and very fancy stuff. And he was like, no, I'm going to give away everything I have and I'll go work with the poor. So that's what he did. And he got the stigmata in September of 1224. And he also got trachoma, which is a bacterial infection caused by poor hygiene. You get chlamydia on the inside of your eyelids.
Oh gosh.
And it's spread by people get it in their nose and in their eyes, and they rub their eyes, and then they shake your hand and you rub your eye, and now you have this junk in your eye. And he got this bacterial infection, and it causes blindness if it's not treated. It's relatively easily treated, I guess, now with antibiotics.
Yep.
Yeah, but it didn't work back then. So he died in 1226. And in July of 1228, he was declared a saint. And the basilica there in Assisi, that the foundation stone was laid by Gregory the Ninth, who was a kind of a friend of the family. Well, and they were
super convenient. Well, yep.
You're in Italy,
Francis,
right?
You're a saint.
Yeah, there you go. So he's a saint. So, and he was buried beneath the lower basilica in 1230. Now, I don't know exactly what happened to him during the 4 years between 1226 and 1230, but his tomb was eventually moved for safekeeping because they were afraid. Like, there were all sorts of people. Europe in that time wasn't people just sitting around at home. There was a lot of travel that took place all around Europe in the medieval times. And they were always, people always, they want relics from saints, right? So they would, there would be grave robbers that would come and steal somebody's finger or something like that for for a relic for their church. So they hid his body and his tomb in 1230. They moved it, and his tomb was lost until
Sounds about right.
I love these stories. He was lost until 1818 when they rediscovered the tomb, and his current resting place, which is in a glass urn in a stone tomb, was finally established in 1978. So that 160 years between 1818 and 1978, he went through a couple of different places. They did some checking. They did some.
See, he did travel the world like his merchant father wanted. It took a little while.
It took a while. And so he was buried underneath the lower basilica at Assisi there. And in 1997, so what, 25 years ago, something like that, there was a big earthquake in Italy there because it's rather, there's volcanoes and stuff in that area. The church was damaged. It was closed for 2 years. And like all sorts of frescoes fell off the wall and bad things happened. But the basilica is back to operating, and we were able to go see that on Sunday morning. So the train station is in the valley, about 2 miles from Assisi, and we decided we were not going to walk there. We just took the bus, and it whisks us up the hill, which was great because the hill was very steep. And the town's on the side of this hill, so there are a lot of long streets that kind of follow the isoclines right across the hillside.
Yep.
The kind
so
of
it's easier to walk.
Yeah, so it's easier to walk. And then there are short little streets that go up and down. So if you look at it on a map, you'll see these really long kind of north to south streets and these very short kind of east to west streets. And we got dropped off there right by the basilica, and we wandered down down Via St. Francesco, which is the St. Francis Street, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we found our little hotel. And it was interesting. We got there, and there was nobody at the hotel. We got there a little bit afternoon, which is a little bit early for check-in. I gotcha, but it was a little local hotel. It wasn't the Hilton, and there was nobody there. But there was a number on there. It says, if you get here and nobody's here, call this number. So I called the number on my cell phone, and it went through somehow through the magic of phone. It was St. Francis intervened and made my phone talk to this lady.
I think it'd really be Gabriel.
It could be Gabriel, but we were on Via San Francisco. I think Gabriel contracts that out.
That's right.
St. Francis.
That's probably how that one works.
Right. And so this lady picked up the phone and she said hello in Italian, which I didn't understand. And then I started talking in English, and she switched right away. And I said, we're here. We're trying to check in. I know it's early. And she said, I will give you the code to the lock and go in there, and you'll find the key to your room. It's number 8. Take the key and you're in. It's like, okay. So I typed in the code. It went, where it electronically opens up, and I opened the door, went in there, and there we were. And the whole time we were there, which was it was a long overnight stay. Okay. We never saw any hotel people. Never. We talked to them on the phone a couple times. and we never heard anybody else in the hotel. So now it was January when we're touring. Right?
Yeah. So who's really going to be visiting Italy in January?
Not real tourists, just guys like this guy. Right?
Just the Bufnagle executive team.
That's right. And I tell you, I thought it was great touring Europe in the winter. It was the winter, it was January, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't, I guess if I had gone to Bavaria or like really far north, like Finland or something, it might've been Finland's north, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or way up to like Denmark or cold places. I was down there in we were there in Florence, and we went to Paris, and winter was not bad there in January of 2024. And I highly recommend touring in January because there's no crowds, and you can get right into where you want to go, no lines. And you could see there were a lot of places where there were like turnstiles that were laid out, those, and we had none of it. We had no problems with any of that stuff. So we walked around we stashed our stuff, and then we started walking around to find a place to eat lunch. And there are lots of little shops there in Assisi, as you can imagine, right? It's a tourist place now. but there was little trinkets and St. Francis kind of art, bobbleheads, of St. Francis and all his friends. There are some really neat stuff, some really kitschy. If you wanted it, you can find it there. The most of the food there that we found in Assisi and in Florence, and let me think about Paris, not so much in Paris, but like there'd be like a little, I don't want to say almost like a diner. Diner is probably a grand word because there'd be very few tables, but there's like a little display case in the front, and they'd have like muffins and croissants and things like that in there. And then they'd have a couple slices of pizza. And then these, like, I'm going to call them like a pita bread sandwich, some kind of bread with some cheese and some meat stuffed inside. And you would say, I'll have one of those. And you point to it, and they pick it up and they put it in this little oven. They heat it up for you, and you get yourself either a soda or a bottled water or something. They're really big on Coke Zero.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. But no Diet Cokes, no Diet Dews. Pepsi, I don't think I heard the word Pepsi when I was there. And
I thought it was when I was in Europe too. A lot of Coke.
Yeah. So that Coke has established itself there, which I thought was really nice. And then this guy recognized that we were Americans. It was not particularly difficult because we didn't speak much Italian.
Howdy, man, I'm an American.
Yeah. Bring me one of them big gulps. We got there and he offered us our little Coke Zeros and he said, would you like ice in your glass? And I don't think I had ice in a drink in days at that point. And he went into his little ice thing and grabbed his tongue. We have a big scoop, right? We scoop in and give you a big thing of ice in your big gulp cup. But he had tongs and he reached in and pulled out a couple cubes and put them in the glasses. And I always hear, when you go to other places, you should really be accommodating to them. But this guy was really accommodating to us. And I thought it was a very gracious and a very hospitable.
As long as there's a mutual respect between both individuals, it should go both ways.
Yeah. And I have to say the Italians were great. And the Parisians we met were great too. But we had no problems getting along with people. It was a wonderful experience. So we had a little lunch there, and then we cruised up and down the shops. And we ended up at the south end of Assisi at the Cathedral of San Rufino, which is like less than a mile from the Basilica, right on the other end of the town. And there's at least on the way, we passed it's called the Minerva Church. And it's kind of like it was an old Greek church. It was like a Greek temple that got subsumed into Christendom.
Interesting.
In Italy there. And it looked like kind of like the facade almost of a like an Indiana Jones kind of thing. It was very interesting.
There probably is something hidden there.
Yeah, I went there and I looked at the floorboards to see if there was any patterns in the tiles.
Any Templar notes or anything.
Yeah. So we were there and we saw that the Cathedral of San Rufino is the church where St. Francis was baptized.
Okay.
So that was kind of cool. And then we walked around that a little bit, but we had to hustle out because, I could have stayed, but I hustled out because there was a funeral ongoing there, and it was, up and coming. It wasn't ongoing yet. I thought it would just be, I kind of wanted to stay just to witness I don't want to make this sound bad. I just wanted to see the human experience there, because it's this was somebody's either father or uncle or whoever it was. And it was this man who had died. And I wanted to see, I kind of felt that I wanted to be part of that with them, even though I didn't.
Almost like it was an obligation of yours to support good things and good people.
Yeah. And you could see, the hearse pulled up and the pallbearers we watched them pull the casket out and bring it into the church. And I was like, it's easy to think of these grand cathedrals of Europe and these grand churches of Europe as these, I guess, just museums to the past. But they're I've been to Mass at Notre Dame, and I've been there years ago when I was there before it burned. And there were tours that were going around the outside, but Mass was still going on. This was a real thing for people. There's a parish there. There are baptisms there. There are weddings there. There are funerals there. All those things happen. And we got to see this piece, this little piece that wasn't a tourist component. It was a piece of real life of the people that lived there. When I was a kid, we grew up in Wisconsin, and we went to Colorado a number of times on vacation to go skiing. And to me, it was very interesting to turn on the TV there in the condo or wherever we were and see different channels and different advertisements for like grocery stores or for Tim's Buffet-orama or whatever it is. And it was odd to me. They would give the local sports, and they talk about the little high school here or this high school there. And as a little kid, it took me a long time to realize this isn't just a vacation destination. People live here, they work here, they have their lives there. And the same thing happened to me in Assisi.
Yeah. And I think that's no matter where you go, right? It's more than just, oh, I'm doing a vacation to New York or Los Angeles or even these big places, right? Somebody coming from Europe to go to New York and visit all the sites. Well, there's more than just the sites. People live their daily lives doing different things just like you and I do. And I think, especially when you talk about churches being these relics or museums of the past, we have to remember that they are still active. They are the same as the parishes that you and I go to, and they have all of the same components. So in a certain way, we shouldn't treat them as relics. We should treat them as active members of the body of Christ, which is what they are.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like, and I know we have a lot of, we're big Catholics, all right, and we have Protestant friends, and they, you know what, you do you. I'm not right. If you want to have that's a discussion for a different day. But one thing I'm not sure. Pride's probably not the right word, but one thing I really appreciate about our liturgy is that when you go to any Catholic church, you're always going to find the same set of things. There are 14 stations of the cross, starting in the upper front on the right and going to the back, and then going back around, to the left and the front. You're going to find the tabernacle. You're going to find a baptismal font. You're going to find all of these components there in the church. And that Sunday when we were there, the readings that were done were the same readings that were done in every other church on the planet for that Sunday, bowing some special modifications if there were special things like, I don't know, special feast days, local,
feast
right?
days within the
so,
diocese.
And that was a great thing. So we heard the readings. Now we heard them. We went to the next day. We ended up going to the Basilica for Mass, and it was in the lower Basilica because there's not very many people, and it's in January, and that way they don't have to heat the big piece. But there was the reading in Italian, and there were a bunch of people there, doing the reading, doing the whole thing, and everything was the same except that it was in Italian. And you start realizing why Latin was a thing in the old church, because no matter where you went, it was always the same. And we could have stayed a little bit later, and they had a Mass in English, which was very nice of them. But we went to the Italian one because we were up in Adam and we wanted to get back and have lunch. So,
you mean breakfast for everybody?
Well,
else,
breakfast,
right?
yes, because we tried to maintain our little morning fast there. So it was a grand thing. We left that St. Rufino's church after the funeral, and we saw this big flight of stairs, and we thought, well, let's go up this flight of stairs. So we went up the flight of stairs, and at the top is this place called Rocco Maggiore, which is this ancient fortress that sits on top of this hill. And we paid this little entry fee, and we did a little self-tour. And it's this castle that sits on the top of the hill, overlooking Assisi and overlooking this grand Umbrian valley. And I climbed up to the top of this thing. You climb to the top of the stairs, which takes you to the bottom of the top hill, and then you climb to the top of the hill, and then you climb to the castle, and then you climb to the top of the tower in the castle. And I went to the top there, and the view was stupendous. It was, and I think it would have been, the sun was in the west because it was late afternoon at that point on Saturday. And so it was a little hazy looking to the west, but looking to the east, you could see down the backside of the mountain. Mm-hmm. And you saw what a wonderful strategic location this fort was on top of this. Like, there's no way you could come from the east into Assisi up that way without being taken out by the castle people. So it was a wonderful defensive castle there, and it was, that thing has been there since since it was 100 years old when Francis was born. All right, it's been sitting there 800 years in pretty much its current state. Tradition holds that there was an acropolis there as early as the mid 500s. So there's been some sort of something on top of that hill for 1,500 years.
Strategic location.
Yeah, it was a great location. It's if you're looking for a location, I got one right there at the top of the hill in Assisi. So we went to mass Sunday morning, like I said, in Italian. And then we went back to the hotel. We checked ourselves out, and then we caught a little bus back to the back to town, and we actually hopped off the bus across from the train station. We got there early because you don't want to be late for the train taking you back to Florence. And so we stopped at the McDonald's. And
that violates the cardinal rule of Donahue vacations.
Yes, it is. The cardinal rule is do not eat anywhere when you're on vacation that you could eat at home. But this was different. They had like a pastry shop.
Unless it's like Perkins for pie. Then
you can. Okay. Yeah. So, but if you don't have a Perkins you are,
okay.
then it counts, right? So, so we stopped at the McDonald's and had a little bit of a snack there waiting for the train. And then we waited again in the little cafe there, and the train took us back to Florence. And then we went back to the hotel, and then we had dinner one more night in Florence. And I stayed up to watch the Packers Cowboys feed come across my phone starting at 10:30 at night on a Sunday. And the next day we headed to the airport and got set to fly to Rome. So it was a great
Fast and Furious almost.
Well, it kind of was, but we had a
kind
good
of was,
deal.
But wasn't. Yeah,
we got there early enough in the day that we wandered around town without objective on Saturday afternoon. And we stumbled on the funeral. We stumbled on the staircase. We stumbled into the castle, and we stumbled into an art shop where the guy did all the paintings. And I really wanted one of his paintings, but I couldn't decide which one. And we were getting hungry, so I thought I'd come back, and I didn't make it back. So next time I would go to his shop, and he does watercolors of the valley, and I thought they were just great things. So, all right, but I have some lessons, Harry.
Please tell me.
Okay.
And tell our listeners.
Okay, so here's the thing. You're going to go do this, and there's a zillion things to see, and don't try to see too much stuff, because then you just end up running from place to place, and you look at it and you check it off.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that I've heard from a lot of people who travel often but want to see one or two objectives.
Yeah.
Find something you really want to go see and carve out the time for it. But make your plans. Like when I was in Albania, a guy that I knew had done a lot of deployments and overseas types of things like this, and he said the same thing. He said he would plan his day in such a manner where he would wake up in one location, and he'd make a route.
Yep.
Say, I want to stop at this little coffee shop, and then go to this location for lunch, and I'll find what I find along the way. And then I'll stop at a coffee shop in the afternoon, and then I'll find at this restaurant for dinner, and I'll do whatever I do along the way.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. The other thing you can do is if you try to build a tight timeline, you don't have any. There's no opportunity for whimsy and no opportunity for serendipity to come your way, and that's a recipe for getting tired and burned out, and it gets pretty old pretty quick. Take your time. It's not a race. You're not going to see everything. In Florence, we could have been there a month, and I wouldn't have seen everything. There's just too much stuff to see there. So just resign yourself to the fact you're not going to see everything, and then enjoy the stuff you do see. And don't ever think, well, you're going to come back home and somebody's going to say, did you see the statue of whatever?
You have to go see this. You have to go do this. You have to eat at this restaurant and this location and try this ice cream. And then it's no longer your experience.
That's true. And then you just get burned out, and they come back. Oh, it's too bad you missed this. It's like, okay, well, I saw the things I got to see, and I enjoyed that. And do what you like. All right. Try to find places that are not McDonald's.
Yes.
All right. And there's a risk there that you're might find something you don't like. But when you were a little kid, you tried new things, and that's how you got to where you are now. And it's probably a good thing you're
Probably
no
keep
longer
doing that.
Yeah, good thing you're not still on Similac. All right. So we did succumb once there in outside of Assisi, and in future stories we will succumb again in Paris, and I'll tell you why. That's for a different thing. But try to hit the local spots and get a feel for the place. Do some exploring where you don't know where you will end up. We saw that staircase, and it went up the side of this hill, and I'll bet there were 150 stairs that you could see from where at the bottom from this road, and went up between these buildings. And I was like, I could get all the way up there, and I might, who knows, maybe there's like a door and it's closed, and I got to
There's
turn
a big bear guarding the Holy Grail.
There's a 3-headed dog. And so it's but we walked up there, and then it opened up at the top, and then you could see when you got to the top, he was like, oh, this is the route to the castle. And then we kept going farther up there, and we saw some things. There was this beautiful old house, and it said private residence on it. Like, that's somebody's house living right up here at the base of the castle. And that's, it reinforced that thing about that these places are more than just vacation destinations. Mm-hmm. So go down the side street, check out the little shop, go ahead, go in there, see what you find. Stop and read the placards. All right, we were in one of these churches in Florence, and I started reading the placards, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Enrico Fermi, I know him. It was like, who's the guy who did the radio?
Oh, blank.
Yeah, the radio guy, Marconi. Marconi had a plaque in there right next to Fermi, and we're like, oh wait, Galileo, I know that guy. So we take the time to read the plaques. Don't just look at David and the Mona Lisa when you're there. Check the other things out, and you'll find all sorts of wonderful things there. And look up there'd be a road name. Who's the guy on this road? And you look him up, and you find out, holy cow, I did not know that guy was a thing, or I didn't know he was from here. And then talk to the locals. That was the part I enjoyed most, was just chatting with them. And I'm so grateful to our Italian hosts for taking the time to learn English. We should probably all know more languages. It's difficult for Americans, basically because where I grew up, Harry, you couldn't find somebody that spoke another language.
Sure.
With any consistency. It was hundreds of miles to get to somebody who spoke something differently. So I think that our European friends have tremendous advantage there, that they get to see all these things at the same time. And my hat is tipped to them for their gracious hosting there in Italy. We had a great time. And whenever you're doing these things, don't let it become stressful, because you know what? It's vacation.
It's vacation. You should be relaxing. Yeah, I think that's right.
It should be a great time.
I kind of almost want to go off your last point there. I think we almost owe it to history to find out more about it, to find out about the guy's name on the roadway, to read the placards, because otherwise it's just lost and no one gets to know about it.
Yeah, I was amazed.
Which seems a little sad.
Yeah. When I moved here to Westfield, I was floored. You can go back to some episodes about the history of Westfield as a spot on the Underground Railroad. And I've talked to people who live here now, and they were like, yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea that all the things that went on in this area of the country, right before the Civil War, this was a hotbed of subversion of the current culture. It was, and that's a wonderful piece of history to have. And there's all sorts of things there in Italy. St. Francis went here and there, and St. Clair went here and there. And there was there were popes that rolled around through that area. And that's just religious history. There's all sorts of other history in there as well, as far as, unification of Italy and stuff like that. And it is, it's, you've got to learn that. And what it'll do is it'll make it'll tie together these pieces of your worldview. When you start reading those things, you won't really see them. You'll just kind of be collecting things, kind of like when you do a jigsaw puzzle. You grab this and grab this and grab this, and finally you go, wait a minute, these two pieces go together. oh, wait a minute, this one goes with those. And oh, this string of things goes with this string of things. And next thing you know, you have the border of the puzzle built. And it's taken, Harry, I've had such a great time doing this podcast over the last couple of years. It is, what I've learned has been this grand tapestry of history and, what do we say?
History,
Science,
philosophy, religion, science, technology, leadership, and success.
There you go. You got it. Yeah, that's what we have. And I've been able to piece that together now through a lot of work. But you guys get to listen, but you just got to remember. And all those things are in the buff. But go make your own adventure, make your own buff, and we'll see you back here next time.
That's right. And in the meantime, we hope everybody goes out there, seeks the good, lives virtuously, and flourishes. And most of all, enjoy the adventure of life.